really mean anything. It's just our brand, IFF. And so the other types of CDFIs that exist that you may be familiar with are community development banks, credit unions. So in St. Louis Community Credit Union is a CDFI credit union. In Kansas City, for the Kansas City folks, Central Bank of Kansas City is a CDFI bank. Most of the 1,300 CDFIs across the United States are actually structured as loan funds. That really just means non-depository, but still specialize in the lending component. And then venture capital funds, I think there's really only a handful of those. So I'd be surprised if you ran across those, but they specialize in sort of equity-like financing tools that may not be loans. So one of our core values is stewarding with heart, and I think this quote from our CEO, Joe Neary, kind of captures that. So at IFF, we believe that every person has the right to a good education, fresh food, healthcare, and affordable housing, and to grow up in a safe environment regardless of income level. And we're here as an organization to provide you and your organization with the tools and resources to help your community thrive for years to come. And one thing, aside from just framing who IFF is, that I think is important here, is we specialize in supporting nonprofits, specifically 501c3s, with access to capital. And that usually means access to capital for real estate development projects. And as I continue to delve into this presentation, you can start to see how this is going to tie directly into decarb work, sustainability, and green financing. So we support nonprofits with the development of their facilities for the deployment of their programs and services. And we are also structured as a 501c3. So that leads right to our mission. So we exist to strengthen nonprofits and the communities that they serve by providing leadership, capital, and real estate solutions. I will unpack all of these things so you get a very clear idea of who IFF is and what we do, and exactly how that lends itself well to supporting decarb work and sustainability work. And then I'm not going to read our vision, but I will highlight that we are we're very intentional about equity at IFF. It really is important to our mission. It's core to how we work with each other internally, and it's core to how we show up externally, especially around the decarb work when you have significant dollars flowing from the federal government. One of the things and one of the roles that we play is making sure that those dollars find their ways to disinvested communities and under served communities that historically have been looked over for investment. So that's a theme that is core to who IFF is as well. So we have a concept called One IFF. Why do we have this concept? Okay, so we're a 36-year-old CDFI. We were founded in 1988. We're headquartered in Chicago. We've deployed over $1.5 billion of non-appraisal based loans since 1988. We like to, if possible, not always, pair our capital with other services. And so what that means when we say real estate solutions, that's our consulting practice. We know that executive directors of nonprofits are not specialists in financing. We know they don't specialize in real estate development. And so when a nonprofit takes on a significant project, their headquarters, new programmatic space, a new healthcare center, a new early childhood education center, we know that the folks that are leading those nonprofits probably don't have the expertise to successfully do that project. And so we like to pair our capital with consulting services where we can help with feasibility analysis. How much is the project going to cost? Site search selection. Where should we do this project? Where are our clients? Where are the families that we serve located in St. Louis or in Minneapolis or in Wisconsin? And where would it be ideal for us to stand up our new space? All the way up through construction management. So when all those decisions are being made with the architect and the general contractor, IFF can actually serve as owner's rep and represent the leadership team of a nonprofit, represent the board as they make all those decisions to help make the project be delivered on time and on budget. We have a development function where we can, it's just basically our consulting function on steroids. We can do a few more things as a developer than we can do as simply a consultant. We have a research and evaluation function where we do systems level research that's really centered around GIS, the geospatial analysis and mapping, where we look at the supply of community services and the demand for community services and just see where there's gaps in community. And then we help community stakeholders ideate on how to fill those gaps. And then we've run some programs in various markets for IFF across the Midwest. So that concept really, all of these things together create a one IFF concept. That's how we hope to show up robustly in community and support the needs of community. As I mentioned, IFF was founded in 1988. We're 36 years old. We now actually have over $1 billion in total managed assets. We have the highest possible rating that a CDFI can have, both in terms of financial sustainability and quality, as well as impact. So that's 4-star AAA plus rating from Aries. We support all sectors that you may find in community development. So it could be affordable housing, it could be early childhood education, K-12, federally qualified healthcare centers, all the sectors that predominate community development. IFF has the skills, expertise, ability, experience in supporting those sectors. And as I mentioned, we operate in 9 states across the Midwest, 9 offices supporting 10 states, across the Midwest. So really glad to see, I think there's some just really natural overlap with this group here, as everybody stated where they were from. Just reinforced, how much overlap there is between this collaborative and IFF and the folks that we have on the ground. We actually have over 150 professionals across the Midwest that support the work that I've highlighted. Here's a little map that shows, shout out to St. Louis and the Midwest here. I'm not going to dig too deeply into all of our services. I will maybe spend a little bit more time on capital solutions. This is our lending program, just because this is federally funded Fridays. And so this group is interested in funding. So one of the keys to our loan program, as I mentioned before, is we specialize in non-appraisal based lending. And so a traditional bank is going to go in and they're going to say, we will lend you 75% of the appraised value of your project once it's completed. In a lot of the communities where nonprofits are doing really high impact work, appraisals don't work. And so you have really high impact nonprofits that need access to capital that can't get what they need from a traditional bank. So I really like our banking partners. That's where we get our capital to do the lending that we do. A lot of banks invest in IFF because of the Community Reinvestment Act, and they also get a financial return, but they're not always well positioned to meet the needs of the nonprofits that IFF is positioned to serve. And so what IFF said is appraisals aren't helping with our mission. So we took appraisals off the table and we will just lend you 95% of the total project cost. These loans are intended to be long-term loans. So typically a real estate loan that we make to a nonprofit is going to be a 15-year loan. And then we can support financing needs of a nonprofit from as little as $10,000 up to almost $7 million. And then we specialize in some specialty financing tools. These are federally supported specialty financing tools like the New Market Tax Credit Program, which is run through the United States Treasury Department, as well as the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, which is also run through the federal government. There's also state variations of some of these programs as well. And then, we mentioned that, it's a little bit different than just a facility for a nonprofit. We also support with affordable housing as well across the Midwest. So just to give you a sense for IFF's impact and scale, in 2023, which was last year, we closed on 153 loans. That's 153 nonprofits that we've supported with access to capital since our founding. It's over 2,200 nonprofits that we've supported. We had a banner year last year with our lending. We lent over 230 million, which is about 100 million more than we expected to lend. But we're really proud that when that demand presented itself and nonprofits reached out to us with a need, that we were able to rise to the occasion and meet the need. And I think that really speaks to who IFF is as well. We're problem solvers, and we find ways to show up for the nonprofits that need our support. Cumulatively, I mentioned that we lent over $1.5 billion. And so you can get a sense that for the impact that IFF had specifically with its loan program. I said 153 nonprofits, looks like it was 90. So there was obviously some nonprofits that took on multiple loans. If anybody caught that little discrepancy there. So that is a little bit about IFF. I'm going to pass it over to Amanda. Is this mine, Amandla? This is mine. Okay. So
I can take it from here just so that we can break it up. Stephen and I haven't done this before, so this is our first roadshow together. And so, Stephen, I can share more about IFF and what a CDFI is. And then I'd love it if you could like jump in with like how we're leaning into the CDFI climate change, and then we'll go forth like that. Okay, great.
Perfect.
So CDFIs, Community Development Finance Institutions, were actually created quite a long time ago, from the late 1800s, where there were minority-owned banks. I'm going to go a little bit quickly through this because you all will receive a recording, and we'll forward the slide deck afterwards, so you're welcome to kind of peruse through this as well too. There are currently in existence about 1,200 CDFIs across the nation. IFF, we pride ourselves in being just a little bit different because we really invest in talent in local markets throughout the Midwest, because we think that having people that are on the ground who understand their communities help us show up in a way that doesn't reflect us saying, here's what you should be doing, but much more of community, what are your needs? And then how can we lean in to provide that? And a great example is how we really leaned into our lending last year. There was a lot of pent-up demand from the pandemic, as well as affordable housing opportunities. And IFF's team really leaned into better understanding, like, what are ways that we can show up, and lending capital was critical to that. The purpose of CDFIs are to promote economic revitalization and community development in low-income communities through investing in and assistance to CDFIs. And so what that looks like is investing in, which is lending capital, and then a term that is very loosely described often is technical assistance. And technical assistance looks a lot of different ways for a lot of different organizations. We can go to the next one, Stephen. Just as a few examples before I jump into this one of CDFIs that you may have come across but didn't know they were CDFIs. There in Indianapolis, there's an Indianapolis Neighborhood Housing Partnership. They focus solely on affordable mortgages for families, individuals and families. And so they have their kind of stick is that they totally provide educational resources to support new homeowners to then get mortgage assistance to buy homes. Another group that you probably maybe didn't recognize as a CDFI, but are in most of our markets is like Local Initiative Support Corporation, or LISC. LISC also is a CDFI. Their concentration is more on place-based work as well as small businesses. So those are two kind of just examples of different ways that CDFIs can show up. Again, IFF, we show up with nonprofits, and I would say that there are a couple categories outside nonprofits that we really care about that are critical to communities being able to thrive. Schools, childcare, federally qualified health clinics, affordable housing, and anyone bringing access to food to communities. So although those are not nonprofits, they're critical to community vitality. And so we often lean in those ways too. We recognize that as part of one of the purposes of CDFIs was really to respond to redlining within communities across the country. I think any of us can agree that if we were to have if we did a map of our communities and layered on top of that map, the redlining communities, and then layer on top of that where we have brownfield or environmental issues, and then layer on top of that where we have less green space, we'd find that those redline communities are the similar locations where all of us need to be doing our work with community development. And so we were very honored, I think, to be able to lean into this space, and we're able to we became an intermediary in 1977. Which was the year I was born, which is so funny that I just got that. So CDFIs are also were a part of the response to the COVID pandemic. So as an example, one of the things that we did was that many nonprofits had a hard time getting any type of traction with their banks around the Paycheck Protection Program. mostly because these were small organizations and it was much easy for a bank to be able to lean into a large corporation. CDFIs really stood up in this space. IFF did as well to make sure that nonprofits had that PPP protection and support that they needed during an unprecedented time for our nation. And so another just opportunity for us to be able to react to the community's needs and not just set the agenda. You can go next, Stephen. I think this is
Yeah.
you.
Just to go up a little bit, one level. So I think one of the themes that is prevalent here with CDFIs is that CDFIs have showed up to help support society and community with significant challenges. So obviously, redlining was a significant challenge to people of color in the United States. CDFIs have stepped up to um, make sure that capital goes where it needs to go because those communities were intentionally segregated from traditional banking opportunities. COVID happened and we were seeing the same thing. Here's a significant challenge for society. And there was folks that were not able to access the capital that they needed. They were being passed over for larger, more well-heeled clients that traditional banks had. So CDFI stepped up to meet that challenge. One of the things that we're going to talk about today is obviously climate change is a significant societal challenge. CDFIs are once again going to step up and play a significant role to make sure that capital flows where it needs to flow so that historically disinvested communities aren't left behind the way that they historically have been when society creates significant challenges for a community. And so on that note, in 2022, there was the Biden administration passed the Inflation Reduction Act. It's known as the single largest investment in clean energy, environmental justice, and carbon pollution reduction in American history. And so it's a very wide-ranging program with a number of tax credit and rebate programs for individuals. And there's a number of opportunities for small businesses as well as nonprofits, with the idea that we shift our economy more towards environmental sustainability and start to potentially, hopefully, reverse the trend we're on with our warming climate. And so there's going to be a significant emphasis per the Inflation Reduction Act, per the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is a subcomponent of the Inflation Reduction Act. It's about $27 billion that's being made available for distributed energy generation and storage, zero net energy buildings, as well as zero emissions transportation are all some of the key initiatives of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, with an emphasis on investment in low-income communities, disadvantaged communities, which are being referred to as LIDACs. And you can start to see with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is a subcomponent of the Inflation Reduction Act, the role that CDFIs are going to have, because you have federal money coming in, and the intent of that federal money is to have impact in low-income, disinvested communities, which is exactly where CDFIs have historically been needed and where we've done our work. And so per that $27 billion, and the thing that I should mention is this is a work in progress. So it's been about a month since a part of sort of the infrastructure of the way that these dollars are going to flow from the federal government into community was sort of solved. There were a number of entities that were named as sort of the first entities that were going to receive the capital that's ultimately intended to flow into community. And the buckets that are intended to be addressed are here on this slide. So $14 billion towards this National Clean Investment Fund, $6 billion towards this concept of Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, and then this concept of Solar for All, which is $7 billion. And that should add up to about $27 billion. And so you can see what the objectives here are of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50 to 52% below 2005 levels by 2030. And you can see there's the transportation initiative here. There's the solar initiative here, which we're looking to just reduce emissions with zero net energy buildings, as well as a zero net energy fleet of vehicles across the United States. So this is in our work, this is actually a very typical looking slide. If you have done any work in the new market tax credit space or the low income housing tax credit space, we like to create these very fancy, complicated structures. It's just sort of a part of the way we do our work. The benefit ends up being well worth the brain damage, I think, sometimes it takes to execute on some of this stuff. But you can see, the capital that's originating at the federal level is intended to make its way into community. The left-hand side is the actual capital. The right-hand side is going to be technical assistance, right? And so when I talked about earlier in our space, where nonprofits don't have the expertise in real estate development, typically because they specialize in early childhood education, they specialize in K-12. Same thing here. This is a growing place for expertise where folks that are going to be the ultimate end users they don't specialize in the technologies that are going to support this sort of green initiative. They don't specialize in solar. They don't specialize in geothermal. They don't specialize in R values and insulation and all the things that go into making a building envelope more sustainable. And so there's a technical assistance component here where the dollars are going to be made available ultimately to CDFIs to support with that technical assistance piece, as well as that access to capital piece. For us, what this looks like is, when we do our traditional lending, a bank may lend $5 million to IFF, and that money goes on our balance sheet and we relend that money out. That's exactly what's going to happen here with these federal dollars. Those dollars are going to be on our balance sheet, 5, 10, $20 million that we relend out with the specific objective of going to our existing clients in communities, disinvested communities, and helping them create eligible projects. I'll say one of the things that we know from our work is that, and we saw this with COVID, money shows up but the community's not ready. It's called capital absorption, where there's just not projects because for any number of reasons. And so one of the roles that we play with our consulting practice or our development practice is to help make sure that projects are ready to receive capital so that when the money shows up, it actually has somewhere to go. And so that's one of the things that IFF and other CDFI specialize in is this technical assistance to say, when the dollars show up, you're not flat-footed, right? We're going to help you prepare for the absorption of that capital, which is just another critical role that CDFIs play and will play to address climate change. And so you may be wondering if you've never heard of a CDFI, is there a CDFI around me? And so the answer is probably yes. Okay, so if I can speak for St. Louis, there's like 9 CDFIs in St. Louis. I'm the executive director of the Southern region, so I oversee the work in both our St. Louis and Kansas City offices. There's about 9 CDFIs in Kansas City. There's a couple more here scattered in Missouri. But you can see here that there's a lot scattered across the United States and across the Midwest. You can go on the Opportunity Finance Network website, which is like the trade association for CDFIs, and you can type in, your geography, and you can find a CDFI near you. And if this is triggering in you that who are the CDFIs around me and then what should I do? You should find a CDFI, and we can help you do that too if you want to reach out after this. And then you should just reach out to them and learn what they specialize in. Not all CDFIs specialize in nonprofit lending. A lot specialize in small business lending, which is going to be another critical place for these greenhouse gas reduction fund dollars to land, and just start a relationship with them. We tend to be a friendly group of folks. This is our consulting. I'm not going to deep dive here, or was that you, Amandla?
Yep, I'll go quickly through kind of the last one so we can have some time. So we wanted to give a few examples of kind of what we've been doing across our footprint, just to kind of show how our real estate solutions team has leaned into thinking about energy efficiency over the last 30 years. We recognize that a greenest building is the one that's already built. So the amount of resources that are pooled to build a new facility when there are so many buildings already currently in our communities that are underutilized gives us an opportunity to really lean in, especially with the folks who do the real work in community, with community development corporations, community centers, Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs, the after school programs, all these different organizations. Many of them actually have to go, they receive buildings for $1, or they have to lease space to provide their services. And we've been, for the last 30 years, helping organizations better utilize those spaces to be more efficient and good stewards of the resources that they receive from their partners to be able to achieve their mission. Can we go back one slide, Sleven? I just want to
Yep.
give another, this is like a really specific example. So this picture right here is Appleseed Childcare. It's in Rensselaer, Indiana. It's a rural community northwest Indiana. And they had reached out to us because they had a childcare desert within their community. And in most rural communities, there are a lot of deserts, childcare, food access, healthcare. And the gentleman that's in the blue, that's standing right next to the sign, he grew up in Rensselaer, moved to New York, was a day trader a day trader at Bank of America. And this is hilarious. He found us on Google. He was like, I need to find someone to help us figure out how to address this childcare need in our community. And so we did a feasibility study with them to understand what the needs were in the community. We looked at some properties together to see, like, hey, could you retrofit this building to do this or not? We helped them get a third-party childcare provider because although they were great at being farmers and small business owners and philanthropy, they didn't necessarily understand how to run a childcare center. And we actually were able to help them work with their healthcare center, the healthcare facility, Franciscan Health. They had an old kind of physician's office that had been shuttered for quite so many years. And they were like, hey, we want to be a part of this because we recognize how important and valuable it is to our community. They allowed them to lease the cost at space, which basically means they just pay for utilities, which is so incredibly important for nonprofits to be able to have the as low overhead as possible to operate. And then we helped them kind of negotiate a longer term lease to then retrofit this building into now a childcare center that has about 100 kiddos that are on the waiting list for this community who need access to childcare. So it's one example of just how we lean into this work. It comes in lots of different ways. Childcare is likely a dire need in most of our communities. And I wanted to kind of lift that one up. Stephen, you can hit double click twice. The next way we did this was we've had some really great opportunities to work with local municipalities in the cities of South Bend and Bloomington. Bloomington actually kicked this off. I don't know if any of you know Lauren Clemens, who's an amazing person. She's now in Washington, the state, not DC. And Lauren and I were sitting around trying to figure out how could we better serve nonprofit clients who want to be more efficient in their facilities, but don't necessarily have the background or the technical ability to understand what it looks like, and then also how do they implement it. And so we created a program called SEAL, Solar Energy Efficiency and Lighting Program, where basically the city of Bloomington and South Bend now provides resources for IFF to do an energy assessment for that nonprofit organization, where we walk through their buildings and look at all the major mechanical things, your windows, your HVAC, your, it's not mechanical, but your insulation. And we help them put together kind of a strategy on how they might be able to, we look at their 12-month energy costs, and how we put together a strategy on here are the priorities if you want to reduce your energy consumption. And then here's how, what that would look like in cost as well. So it's your priorities, your cost, and then each of those cities put together matching dollars to then help those organizations to implement those projects. So those projects were, we've invested together nearly $1 million between those two projects. And it looks like, gosh, solar, there's a lot of solar, especially early on solar projects, energy efficient windows, doors. I mean, it's an amazing program. And it's really started to, we're looking at other cities across the state of Indiana to start to think about how do we implement a similar program, because it goes back to the very fundamental of what nonprofits need. They need to be able to provide their services in a space that provides dignity to their clients. And in order to do that, they have to be able to steward the resources they have better. So these two cities are great examples. South Bend did a cohort model, which is a little bit different than Bloomington, where they have kind of events and people come together each quarter to kind of talk about what they're doing to be more efficient in their facilities. But it's really started to build a group of people who are just more conscious of what it means. And it doesn't mean that it has to be, I think that oftentimes people hear like green gas reduction and they get kind of excited about the trendy terms that are going on, but like people are really trying to hopefully do this work. I totally could picture this in Evansville as well too, and would love to talk to the new mayor, which I'm excited about. Stephen, jump to the next one. Here's just another great example. NXG is a youth motorsports, because we're Indianapolis, right? So we have to do something with motorsports. So we're it's a youth motorsports organization that mentors young people to go into racing. And they they had applied to the city of Indianapolis to receive a former garage that the state owned, to reuse it into a garage that they could put all of their building materials. They could work on their vehicles together. They could have STEM programming. The city of Indianapolis then gave them the building at cost, so free, basically, because it's a hot mess. And then they're being able to take and repurpose this dilapidating building, as you can see, that will be a beautiful like STEM center that will combine minority youth with racing and bring all of that together to really provide an amazing program. So that's just another example. So we wanted to kind of lift up, like, it's one thing to bring capital to these projects, and that's incredibly important for us. It's another thing for us to also be able to lean into providing technical assistance. And we've been doing this for the last 30 years, helping nonprofits understand how to retrofit their buildings to be more efficient. And are excited to continue this work through the greenhouse gas reduction opportunities. But this is what we do. This is our bread and butter every day, work with nonprofits to make sure they have access to capital for facilities and facility planning. That is Stephen. Here's me. We would love to chat with anyone who has questions, or I think we have 4 minutes. So if there are some questions that you may have, happy to jump on board. I do see one that I can answer right now around smaller rural communities. So we work with all nonprofits. There is not a size that we would say, oh, you're too small or too big. And especially have been trying to figure out how we more authentically step into rural communities, because our offices are in mostly major cities like St. Louis and Indianapolis. But Rensselaer is a great example of when we were invited in to kind of help them solve a problem. We're very open to that. I would say that. Stephen, would you add as far as like the rural communities question?
Yeah, from a capital accessibility perspective, we consider ourselves to have a corner to corner in every state capability. And so while our offices may be in more major metros in the states that we're in, we do have the capability to underwrite loans anywhere in any of the states that are in the Midwest. We may be a little bit constrained from the technical assistance perspective, but I wouldn't say fully. I mean, here in the what we call the southern region, which is Missouri, we're currently supporting the development of a new headquarters for the Missouri Primary Care Association in Jefferson City. And so obviously that's not in St. Louis or Kansas City. It's in the middle of the state. And so, I think it's just sort of it can be a case by case basis. I think access to capital, is an easier lift for us. But the consulting piece, we'd be happy to talk about no matter where the project is. it looked like somebody asked for a recommendation for a CDFI that might be interested in a revolving loan for home efficiency upgrades to complement the federal rebates. Um, the question I would have there is just what geography is this question coming from?
So I'm in Dane County. So we're starting up
Wisconsin.
yeah, in Wisconsin, and we're starting up a cohort of community-based organizations to help do outreach for underserved communities around the federal rebates. And one of the gaps that we see is that the rebates are not going to be enough to cover all of the home efficiency upgrades that they're going to have to do in order to reach the 20% efficiency gains that they need to reach in order to qualify. And so one of the options we were thinking about is a revolving loan. But we need a partner to do that.
Yeah, that may be one we have to follow up on. I'm not familiar with the CDFI landscape in Wisconsin, but we have an office in Milwaukee. So I'd be happy to follow up and just I can email back out to the group maybe a couple of recommendations for CDFIs that would specialize in sort of that retail lending.
And we do have an office in Ohio. We have one in Cleveland and some staff in Columbus. And so we do have an Ohio footprint as well. I saw that up top. One of the questions was around, does IFF envision working with entities like Illinois Finance Authority or the Illinois Climate Bank and the DOE Loan Programs Office? The short answer would be yes. I think that likely you'd want to check in with our executive director in the Chicago metro area. Her name is Vicki Lakes Battle, who could definitely connect you more with those specifics. She is a more, again, this is kind of how we work, is that we have local talent that really drives that work. We know enough to be dangerous in each of the other markets because we're friends, but we also recognize that Vicki knows much more than she will know much more than I do.
The other thing I would add to that is that CDFIs and IFF, we play well with others. And so we can actually support a number of roles with other capital that may be coming into a project. And so we do a lot of work with the state of Illinois. For example, we were there, they did a capital program for early childhood across 5 regions in Illinois. East St. Louis was one, and we deployed capital for the state. That was actually a grant program that we administered for them. And so if there's other sources, government sources, local government, municipality sources, other traditional bank sources, we are hyper flexible in the way that we can interact with those other sources. We can bridge capital. So sometimes, money comes from a state and it's reimbursable. And so an organization or a business or, has to have the cash up front to pay for whatever the improvement is, and then they get reimbursed on the back end. They may not have the cash. So that's a role for a CDFI like an IFF to say, hey, we'll lend you the money and you can do the project. And then our source of repayment will just be you being reimbursed with that government source. And so we envision, working with entities like the Illinois Finance Authority and Illinois Climate Bank and DOE Loan Program Office, the same way that we've done over the past 36 years across any number of programs. USDA, we do a lot of food lending in Kansas, actually, specifically. But there's a lot of USDA projects that support programs that support rural access to food. And so we've been, good partners with a lot of sources across a lot of sectors in our history.
We are right at 10 o'clock, so I know some folks are going to have to jump, but I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes. And Amandla and Stephen, if you have time, I don't want to cut you off. This has been really, really wonderful. But first, I just want to give us a chance to thank both of you before people do have to jump. This has been really wonderful based on the comments in the chat. I can tell people are really getting a lot out of this, and we're really grateful that you've joined the Midwest Climate Collaborative as one of our members, and so we're excited to explore future collaboration there as well. If you have time and want to take another question or two, I will leave that up. Yeah, I see some nods. Okay, so we'll hop on, but if anybody else needs to jump, have a great weekend. I did drop some more links in the meeting notes. Amandla did a presentation at the summit in Indianapolis in April, and I linked that in the running notes. So that was with Alex Crawley of the Indiana Energy Independence Fund. So if you want to go back and relive the summit, that link is available for you there. And we'll get the updates posted to the website by next week as well. So yeah, I'll let you guys keep going. Thanks.
And I'll just say quickly, thank you for the opportunity. So we appreciate your time and everyone jumping on. And this seems like really great participation. So thank you.
Yeah, same. It's you know, like many of you, we do this work because we love it and it's our why. And I think that really shows just in what we're dedicated to doing, even if we have to hop on our cell phone to start a meeting and then get to a real computer. I told our CEO a couple weeks ago, I'm like, if I stop loving this work, you should be worried. Because this is really about the work. You know, it's about the community and the people we get to serve, and we're just privileged to be in this seat. One of the questions Ricardo had was around, like, do we work with, I think your question is really like, do we work with technical assistance consultants specifically, who provide and advise them on projects? Our client is typically a nonprofit organization. And our goal is always to help them be more informed on how they can be better stewards of their resources to do the work they want to do. We can all agree that typically when a construction project is being done, the environmental things in that project are typically the ones that are value engineered out because costs have gone up. And so our role is always to make sure those things stay in place, because we look at a long-term financial feasibility, not just that a project could get done tomorrow, so that they can then move on to working in the project. And so as an example, when Stephen mentioned 90 nonprofits were served, although we did 153 loans, the 90 nonprofits were actually the 90 nonprofits that we served through our real estate consultancy last year. Those nonprofits don't have to, you do not have to receive real estate consulting in order to get a loan from IFF. So there are nonprofits who also come to us because they can't access capital in other ways, or for whatever reason, we're just a better match or fit for that. And so just wanted to share that distinction. Our typical client is a nonprofit organization. Just as kind of some background, when Lauren and I were working on the Bloomington project, we actually went to several environmental firms and asked if they could do like these type of assessments for the nonprofits. And their fees were like, gosh, like $50,000 per nonprofit. And it was just out, there was no they weren't going to be able to access that resource. And it was so in depth that what we really needed was like real-time things that they could do that would show impact immediately and long-term. And so that's kind of why IFF adjusted our facility assessments to make sure we reflected more of the energy efficient efforts, because it was just the market was pricing out anyone who reasonably who cared about the work, couldn't afford to do it.
And thank you. The only thing I would add, I mean, when it says environmental projects, we do specialize not only in the nonprofit space, but with the built environment. And so if you're thinking of like an environmental project, I'm going to totally shoot from the hip here, like some like floodplain mitigation or something, you know, that doesn't have something to do with a building, that is not going to be an IFF role where we would advise on something like that. We're staffed by former architects and general contractors that have specialized in the development of schools, community spaces, more commercial style real estate development. So something that's purely, land, waterways, something like that, that's just not going to be something that is in our wheelhouse.
Thank you. That clears a lot up there. I guess I was thinking more for if it's with nonprofits, it's more building projects within the building envelope. Like if a new piece of equipment needs to be paid for, you could for a nonprofit, you could cover that type of thing. Or
that's us.
That's
Yeah, so
okay.
we do equipment lending. Yeah, exactly. So if there's some retrofitting of some upgrades and you want to install solar panels on the roof or
Right.
something like that, that would definitely be IFF. We don't have to do a full-blown real estate project, and we could consult on the various things that would need to be considered for doing like a solar project, for example. If you think about doing solar on the roof, right? For example, that would be something where we could definitely lean in.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
yeah,
like,
that's good to know. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna add too, so like a facility needs assessment would look at like, here are all of your major functions within your facility. And then here's what they would call, here's the life cycle of those facilities. So this is also a way to kind of plan ahead as well too. You may have like your HVAC system may be great, but it's 20 years old and your maintenance isn't the greatest. You don't change your filters as often as you should. And so your life cycle of that piece of equipment may only be 25 years. And so I think part of the secret sauce of what we do is our financial feasibility and helping nonprofits understand that if you're going to put some money aside to think about things that you need to be doing, here are things that you should be putting your resources towards. And here's the timeline to be thinking about those so that they also start to think about, okay, who are the philanthropic partners who may fund this type of work besides IFF? And it's not like, okay, now it's year 2 of 5 and your HVAC system has gone out. Where do you go? And we really thrive in those type of spaces because we don't require an appraisal and we understand nonprofits' financials to help them get access to that capital as quickly as we can to make sure to alleviate that.
And Lauren,
That's
when
great.
you
Thank you.
say renewable energy project development, can you give me a sense for what you may be implying by that?
I think you might have answered my question, just whether or not IFF supports just rooftop installations or if you also support standalone developments, if they in turn serve the community from like a resource generation standpoint. I'm just wondering if that's something IFF has done in the past, those standalone systems, and whether or not it's something you would be interested in pursuing in the future.
Yeah, I think the key is going to be, is there a nonprofit involved, right? Is a nonprofit creating a renewable energy project that's going to support the community or support itself? And so because one of the things, we're a mission-based lender and mission-based organization, so it just has to have that nonprofit component to be something that we would have the mandate to support on.
To follow up on that, just to clarify, so for instance, if the system was community owned, if it was owned by the public, but the project management was being conducted by the municipality, does that qualify?
We could talk about that. I think that, and so that's one of the things about, being so flexible is that we do, we're called in a number of sort of unique situations. But I think it's always worth the conversation for us to learn more. And then we can share out, more specifically and bring the right team members in to say, is this something specifically that we could support on? So I think that sounds like something, that would be worth having a conversation about to see how we could potentially be supportive.
Great, thank you. Great questions, folks. And because IFF is a member, I assume we can maybe come back to you all if we have more questions in the future. And if there's ever any information you want to share with this group, please feel free to send it on to me and I'll pass it along. And you're always welcome, Amanda and Stephen, and David, is David with IFF as well? I saw him jump on. Okay, that's what I thought. You're always welcome to hop on these Friday calls. This is great. Oftentimes it's kind of all of us sitting around talking about what current questions we have, sharing information, and it's great when we do have really content-rich presentations like this. But like I said, feel free to hop on anytime and we'll definitely stay in touch. I'll be sharing some of these links, like I said, in the notes. Great, people are sharing their email addresses. I will add those to our notes document as well. And I'll save this chat too. And Thanks, everybody. Great to see you all. Hope you have a great weekend. And yeah, if you're able to share the slides with me, send those along, and I'll also post those to that to the notes as well.
Thanks, Heather.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.